Okay, final lesson on drawing straight line graphs. So we're on lesson 3 now, where we're looking at fractions and having to rearrange. So question 1, we've got y equals a half x plus 2. So we're going to stop our first x value in minus 2. So we've got a half times minus 2 plus 2. Now a half times minus 2 is going to give us minus 1. Plus 2 will give us positive 1. And our next x value, so minus 1, so a half times minus 1 plus 2. A half times minus 1 will give us minus a half. Plus the 2 will give us 1.5, 1.5. Next one, half times 0 plus 2. So half times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. Half times 1 plus 2, half times 1 is just a half, plus 2 is 2.5. And then we've got a half times 2 plus 2. Half times 2 is 1, plus 2 is 3. So we've got our coordinates. We can now plot those on our axes. So we've got minus 2, 1. Minus 1, 1.5. Which would be about here. 0, 2. 1, 2.5. And 2, 3. And we can join those up with our nice straight line. Okay, so you may have drawn your axes slightly differently, but make sure you've got these values correct for your y values and that you've plotted them as accurately as you can on the axes that you have used. Question 2. So this time we've got y equals a quarter x plus 4. So we've got a quarter times minus 2 plus 4. So a quarter times minus 2 is minus a half. Plus 4 gives us 3.5. Then we've got a quarter times minus 1 plus 4. So a quarter times minus 1 is minus a quarter. Plus 4 leaves us with 3.75. A quarter times 0 plus 4. Well, a quarter times 0 is 0. Add 4 is 4. A quarter times 1 plus 4. A quarter times 1 is a quarter. Add 4 is 4.25, or 4 1/4. And last one, we've got a quarter times 2 plus 4. Quarter times 2 is just a half. Plus 4 is 4 1/2. So we can then use those coordinates to plot on our axes. And again, your axes may be slightly different, but as long as you've got those y values, to make sure you've plotted them as accurately as you can on the axes that you've got. So minus 2, 3.5. So we're going to have 3.5. Minus 1, 3.75. So a little bit trickier. 0, 4. 1, 4.25. And then 2, 4.5. So again, not the best axes to plot it on, but do it as accurately as you can, all the way across your axes. So that is y equals quarter x plus 4. Question 3. So this time we've got y equals 3/4 times x plus 2. So we're going to start with 3/4 times minus 2 plus 2. So 3/4 times minus 2. So we'll get minus 6 on top, and then 6 divided by 4 will leave us with minus 1.5 or minus a half, and then plus 2 will leave us with positive a half, 0.5. Next one, so we've got 3/4 times minus 1 plus 2, so that'll give us minus 3/4 plus 2, or minus 0.75 plus 2. Minus 0.75 plus 2 gives you 1.25. So you can see we've added on the 0.75. Next one, we've got 3/4 times 0 plus 2. 3/4 times 0 is just 0, plus 2 is 2. 3/4 times 1 plus 2. 3/4 times 1 is 3/4, plus 2 is 2 3/4. And the last one, 3/4 times 2 plus 2. So 3/4 times 2 gives us 1.5, plus 2 gives us 3.5. So we can plot those points on our axes now. So we've got minus 2, 0.5. We've got minus 1, 1.25. 0, 2. 1, 2.75. And 2, 3.5. Again, do that as best you can on the axes that you have. Make sure you've extended that line the full way across, and then label it y equals 3/4 x plus 2. Question 4. So this time we've got 3/2 times minus 2 minus 2. So we've got 1.5 essentially times minus 2 gives us minus 3, and then we've got to take away the 2, which leaves us with minus 5. We've then got the 1.5 times minus 1, take away 2, so that's going to leave us with negative 1.5 minus 2. So minus 1.5 minus 2 leaves us with minus 3.5. We've got 3/2 times 0 minus 2. 3/2 times 0 is 0. Take away 2 is just minus 2. 3/2 times 1 minus 2 is obviously 1.5 minus 2, which is minus 0.5. And lastly, we've got 3/2 times 2 minus 2. So 3/2 times 2 is 3, minus 2 is positive 1. So we can then substitute those coordinates in. So we've got -2 minus 5, -1 minus 3.5, 0 minus 2, 1 minus 0.5, and then 2, 1. And again, we need to join those all up with a nice straight line and label it y equals 3/2 x minus 2. Question 5, so onto the rearranging questions now. So we need to get our equation in the form y equals. So we want to be y equals. So we need to rearrange the equation that we've got to make sure we've got the y all on its own. So we're going to start by trying to get rid of this -1 just here. So we're going to plus 1 to both sides, because that's how we get rid of a -1. So that's going to leave us with 2x plus 1 equals y. And we've done exactly what we wanted. We've got the y all on its own on one side of the equals. So we can now rewrite our equation as y equals 2x plus 1. So this is now the equation that we're going to use. So we're then going to substitute those values in. So we've got -2 times 2 is -4, plus 1 is 3. 2 times -1 is -2, plus 1 is 1. So it should be -3. 2 times -1 is -2, plus 1 is -1. There we go. That's where I was confused. 2 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. And then our last two values, because we're adding 2 each time, is going to be 3 and 5. And we're going to pop those coordinates onto our axes. So we've got -2 minus 3, -1 minus 1, 0, 1, 1, 3, and 2, 5. And then again, make sure you've joined all of those points all the way to the end of your axes. We can label that y equals 2x plus 1. Question 6. Again, we need to get our equation in the form y equals. Y equals. So we're going to rearrange our equation. So I'm just going to bring it down here. So to get the y on its own, we need to move this 2x. So we're going to subtract 2x from both sides. So that's going to leave us with y equals 4 minus 2x. So we can say up here, we can rewrite our equation as y equals 4 minus 2x. And this is now going to become the equation that we're going to use. So we're going to substitute our x values into our equation. So we've got -2 times -2 is +4, plus the 4 we already had is 8. -1 times -2 is +2. So 4 plus 2 is 6. And we're subtracting 2 each time. So we're going to then have 4, 2, and 0. I'm going to pop those onto our axes. we've got minus 2, 8. Minus 2, 8 up here. And minus 1, 6. 0, 4. 1, 2. And 2, 0. So we're then going to join all of those points up with our ruler. Right to the edge of our axes. And we're going to label that y equals 4 minus 2x. Question 7. So I've introduced a fraction and we have to rearrange it. So again, we want to get it into the form y equals. So we're going to have to get rid of this plus 2 on this side and move it onto the other side of our equals. So remember, to move a plus 2, we need to subtract 2 from both sides. So that leaves us with y equals a half x minus 2. Now we can substitute into our equation, because this is now the new one that we're going to use. So half x minus 2. So we've got minus 2 times a half minus 2. So minus 2 times a half is minus 1. Minus 2 is minus 3. Half times minus 1 minus 2 is minus a half minus 2. So that will give us minus 2.5. And then we can fill in the rest by counting up in halves. So we've got minus 2, minus 1.5, and minus 1. We can then plot those on our axes. So minus 2, minus 3. Minus 1, minus 2.5. 0, minus 2. 1, minus 1.5. And 2, minus 1. And then we're going to join those up right to the ends and label it y equals a half x minus 2. Right, final question. Right, so this time we've got the equation a half x minus y equals 2, and we need to get that into the form y equals. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to move the half x onto the other side. So we isolate the y. So we're going to subtract a half x from both sides. So that's going to leave us with minus y. So remember, that negative stays in front of the y. We haven't done anything with that yet. Equals 2 minus a half x. But now we've got the issue where we've got a negative y. We don't want negative y, we want positive y. So to get rid of the negative, we're going to change the sign in front of every term. So I can rewrite this as positive y, and then we're going to turn our 2 into a negative 2, and our minus a half x into a plus half x. So we can change the sign of one thing as long as we change the sign for everything else in our equation as well. So I'm going to rewrite that up here as our new equation. So we've got y equals half x minus 2. Then we can work that out. So half times minus 2, take away 2, leaves us with minus 1 minus 2 is minus 3. And then we know that our gradients are half, so our values are going to increase by a half each time. So we're going to have minus 2.5, minus 2, minus 1.5, and minus 1. So pretty much the same as question 7. Once you've rearranged it, of course. Okay, so we're going to plot those on again. So we've got minus 2, 3, minus 1, minus 2.5, 0, 2, 1, minus 1.5, and 2, minus 1. And again, we're going to join those up. Right to the edges, nice straight line, y equals half x minus 2.